So this is just a introduction to my project. So I'll be going through my or just the project, the goals, the objectives, and the challenge at hand. So my goals for the project, what I want to get out of the project was basically a better understanding of CICD. I want to complete the project in the time given to me, and then I also want to learn some tools that I could use in my final year project. So the objectives for the actual project was to use all the required tools like Maven, JUnit, Docker. My next objective was to use optional tools, so like a database, Kubernetes, something with the front end like React. I didn't want to get the project actually working, so all the containers talking to each other. So my actual project idea was just simple. It was just a basic employee creator. So you had your employee name, their age, and where they were going to be working, so what department, and some other inputs that the person would have to put in when signing up for the employee, and then also they actually delete employees. So I'll just get into how I started doing this project. So I'm quickly going to run through my three microservices and its code. So here we have our person repo. So our person repo is connected to our database. So here we pass our person data and we also pass the long ID. So over here, this is where the user puts in all the data. So here we have these regulations. So the name can't be blank, the age has to be over 18, has to be email, etc. We also have our ID that MongoDB will give it. We also have our document. So collection is the name of our database. We also have down here in our properties the MongoDB string. So the string has our username, password, and our database so it can connect to it. This is my Docker file that I'll run later on just to show that it can containerize and create an image. So this is my delete microservice. So inside the controller, we see we have a delete mapping. So once the user puts in an ID, you'll see that it'll delete the person from the database. Again, this is my different microservice. This one actually creates a person. So here, again, user enters the data and runs this HTTP post request, and we then bring the person to the database. This is my front end. Here you can see that we're giving the user a bunch of options like enter an age, number, ID. We also give them the option to delete the ID. So once they press the button, either delete button or the create person button, it goes to either of these handlers, depending on which one they press. You can see here we have a delete and a post, and then we have those same HTTP API requests. So here it deletes it based on the ID given, and here we create the person. So these connect back to our backend and then our database. This is my Docker file for my front end. You can see that we run the npm install. This is just to get all the files like the node modules, and we also have npm start to start the actual running of the program. I might ignore here just to ignore the node files because they're very hefty. And then again, I have a Docker compose file. Docker compose file is made up of our services. So our front end service, we have our create person and our delete person. They're all on the same network and they're all bridged so no one can see it. So you can see here on my Docker desktop, none of our images or containers are running, so let's run them. So before running, you should always clean, package, and then use whatever is in the target file. I've done that, so I'm just going to go straight here and run my Docker file. Once that's being done, you'll see once it's completed that we'll soon see that it's going into the running. So you can see here, great person has started running because we ran our Docker file there. It's 14 seconds ago. I've now also ran my delete person. So now both my microservice create person and delete person are containerized. So now let's do our front end. So running my front end is a bit different. We're actually going to run the Docker compose file. So we do Docker compose up, and that'll run our front end. So finally, once that's done, you can see all of our microservices are running. So we have my front end, my delete person, and my create person. So you can see that's made up of from our services. We have our CI/CD front end, create person, and delete person. Now we can head over to Google and actually look at our front end. So now that we ran our localhost 3000, you can see that this is our front end. So it displays to the user all these options and the delete option. So for MongoDB, I'm using Atlas. That means I don't have to containerize or package anything. You can see here we have 6 employees at the moment. So we have myself, Michael, John, and a few more me's. You can see that we're in here in persons and not the other two databases, just in case any mistakes are made there. So let's go back to the front end and add and delete users. So I'm going to add a user. So we'll add someone called Mike. We'll give him 34. We'll add in his email, give him a title, and then we'll say he's a co-op. So we'll click create person and we should see below here that they were created successfully. Yep, so we were given the console.log that they've been created successfully. So if I head back into my database and refresh, you'll see that we've gone from 6 employees to 7. So yeah, so Mike has been added here at the bottom. Now, if you want to remove an employee, you have to take the ID. So the ID that I talked about earlier, I'm going to copy that. And when we go back over to our front end, we can enter it here. So we just entered the ID, sorry about that. And so this is the ID just from John. So once we enter it and we delete, it should come up here, person delete successfully. So once we refresh, you'll see that we have 6 people and John has been deleted. So we'll also just delete Mike just to see that that go a bit smoother. So yeah, a bit smoother there. Again, you can delete the employee. So that's it from our three microservices. One microservice adds the user, one deletes it, and then the other presents it to the user, so the front end. So once I completed that, I pushed my Docker images up to Docker Hub. So you can see here, I have my create person, delete person, front end person. The way I did this was I used the terminal. So I would go and I would first of all tag the images I want to use. So you can see here, I tagged the create person, delete person, and front end person. I then logged in and I would push these to Docker Hub then. So next I tried to do Kubernetes. So again, similar to Docker Hub, I used the terminal, but this time I used my cloud, Google Cloud shell. So similar, I tagged them and then I pushed them up. So you can see here, I then went into Kubernetes and I connected them. So you can see here that I have create person, delete person, and front end. So if I go into my create person, you can see that it is here. And I also have an endpoint. So the only problem I found was I couldn't get the endpoint working. So in Talent, this should work theoretically. So I've replaced my local host with the endpoint. However, when I run it, I just get an error. So yeah, I just get an error whenever that runs. So I couldn't get Kubernetes working. I tried to do all of them, but it doesn't seem to work. So when I didn't get Kubernetes working, I did get my 3 containers working and communicating with each other. I do have a front end working with MongoDB Atlas where it takes in these inputs from my React front end, sends them to my backend, and then from my backend it sends them into the database. For research, I use MongoDB documentation and also MongoDB Atlas documentation. I also use the VS Code documentation for helping me with Docker composing and trying to compose my Docker files, or trying to get my Docker image up and running. I also used forms like the Docker forms, GitHub forms, and also Stack Overflow for things like Docker Desktop, um, trying to connect my front end and back end in VS Code, trying to get my Docker files to communicate between my front end and my back end. Finally, that's everything. That was my CICD project. So again, just 3 microservices, my front end, my create person and my delete person all talking to each other in containers. So another thing I quickly added to my MongoDB was a security check. So whenever I'm pushing code, if it includes to a MongoDB, you'll see here when I go to merge, show all my checks. The Git Guardian will just check for any sort of breaches from my MongoDB. So if my MongoDB code is in there and it shouldn't be, it'll just let me know.